Hello everyone and welcome to the start of a new series in which I will be ranking every single From Software boss fight in a gigantic tier list. And when I say every single fight, I mean every single boss fight. From giant battles against Lords of Cinder to the lowest of the low dungeon mini-bosses and field encounters. But before I get into that, two things. First, subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any future uploads. Second thing is my criteria for ranking and the actual tiers that I'm going to be using. For the most part, you can just kind of think of these as like out of 10 rankings, peak being 10 out of 10, and kind of going down one by one until we have like 4 and below. Clears the Bible. Obviously, zenith of the medium, pinnacle of human creation. Very, very few bosses will be making it into this highest of tiers. Those of you who know me well, or have heard me talk about them before, will probably know what or which bosses will make it into this tier and how many of them. For those of you who don't, make your predictions down in the comments. As for how I will be grading these bosses, not really giving number grades, but my criteria for how I rank them will be a handful of categories: mechanics, design, fairness, lore, spectacle, and an extra bonus category for any sort of special things that aren't necessarily covered by these other more specific categories. So to start off, we have the first ever Soulsborne boss, the Vanguard Demon, our tutorial boss, who we're not really meant to beat, and we really only get one chance to beat, but who we can beat. They're very basic, but there's not really anything wrong with them, so they're going to go in the enjoyable tier. Next we have Phalanx, our first real boss that we're intended to defeat, and they're pretty boring. There's not much of an actual fight involved. This is the start of a bit of a pattern with Demon Souls bosses being somewhat puzzle or gimmick-centric. The gimmick for Phalanx being that it's very weak to fire, and the level is constantly giving you either fire bombs or pine resin to buff your weapon. So you're kind of meant to just really easily defeat the boss without doing much in the way of fighting them. Essentially just wipe out the hoplites with fire bombs, and then throw however many you have left at Phalanx itself, then buff your weapon and beat it to death. And that's pretty much what Phalanx fights always boil down to. And that's not particularly interesting or engaging, so it's going to go in boring. Next we have Tower Knight, who's perhaps the most iconic of all Demon Souls bosses. And I think he's pretty good. The spectacle of fighting this giant, towering knight is really cool. I like sort of how the fight plays out with you having to go around and kill these archers while the Tower Knight's chucking these giant magical lances at you so that you can actually go and bite at the thing's ankles without getting peppered with arrows, and bring the thing down and smack it in the head until it dies of brain trauma. I'll put this fine specimen in the quality tier. I think he's pretty solid. Next we have the Armor Spider, which is kind of a mix between the two, because for the most part you kind of fight it normally, but it's in a unique arena, and it has this reset mechanic with the Wave of Fire, which forces you to go back to the beginning and dodge its attacks, and you can really only damage it by hitting its head or giant stinger thing. It's alright. It's not really amazing. There's not really anything that makes it super noteworthy, but nothing that makes it a particularly bad experience, so I'll just put it in the enjoyable tier. Next we have Flame Lurker, which is absolutely tremendous. It's very difficult, very fast-paced, which is pretty unique for Demon Souls bosses, as Demon Souls is a fairly slow game, at least compared to the future FromSoft games. This is probably a good time for me to mention that for the most part these rankings are based on the boss within the game itself, within the mechanics of the game, how it feels to fight them with the gameplay of the game they're in. Obviously, almost any Elden Ring boss is going to blow almost any Demon Souls boss out of the water, but relative to the game that they're in, that's not always going to be the case. So, this is not judging every boss from every game to the same standard, more so judging them within their own game. And with that in mind, Flame Lurker is definitely some top quality. It is an absolutely tremendous boss. Next, we have the Dragon God, which is the opposite of Flame Lurker, and that it fucking sucks. It's terrible. Who decided to make a stealth boss that takes like 10 fucking minutes of you standing behind pillars, going and destroying rubble and then running away so you don't get one or two shotted by the Dragon God, to just go activate a ballista that takes away like 2/3 of the boss's health, and then doing that again. Oh, and if you die, you have to do the whole thing over again. Every run against Dragon God takes a while and is never enjoyable. It's just bad. It's a bad boss. There's basically nothing good about it. The design of the Dragon God is awesome, but it is wasted on such a terrible fight. Next we have the Fool's Idol, which in my opinion is just kind of annoying. You know, the shock runes on the ground, they're just kind of obnoxious. All for you to just go around and smack a boss that doesn't really do much other than occasionally shoot magic at you. Not great. Not particularly enjoyable. Next we have the Man-Eaters, which is pretty good. The Man-Eaters are pretty good. Difficult, but not too bad. I feel like it kind of maybe is a little unfair in regards to the arena. That's kind of where most of the problems for me come, that stops it from being elevated to a higher tier, is that the arena you fight it in is not very good. Most of your deaths are going to be due to gravity. And sometimes the Man-Eaters have kind of a hard time interacting with the arena. Like, some of my Man-Eater fights have been pretty janky. They don't mesh with the place you're fighting them in all that well. So for those reasons, I'm going to put Man-Eaters in the quality tier. Oh, where is it going? It's just falling out of my grasp. My god. Yeah, I'm going to put it in quality. I'll put it above Tower Knight, because I do find, generally speaking, the fights that don't really have much in the way of gimmick or puzzle aspects are far more enjoyable and engaging than just a puzzle boss. Now, the Old Monk is an interesting case, because depending on how you play Demon Souls, and by how you play it, I mean whether you play it on or offline, your experience with fighting the Old Monk will differ greatly between each individual time that you fight it, because if you play online, there's a pretty solid chance that another player will invade and you will fight them as the boss, which means that your battles against them can either be really good or really shit. The last time I fought the Old Monk, I actually fought two different people. The first one, I believe, was trying to do bleed buildup on me or something. I can't even tell. They were hitting me with weapons that were doing basically no damage. I don't think they had the stats to use them, and then they just quit out like halfway through. So another person had to come in for me to fight. It was very strange. Kind of hilarious, but very strange. And also, this will be the first instance of me bringing up the special category. The run-up to this fight is not very good. Fighting the Mind Flayers in a very tight space, not great, not very good. You have to do that every time that you go back to fight the Old Monk, and sometimes you will, because there's a chance that you'll be invaded by some guy who is absolute god at PvP. Or you'll be invaded by someone who's terrible. It's an incredibly inconsistent experience. Though I do applaud the creativity of having a PvP fight that's different every time. For these reasons, I'll put the Old Monk in enjoyable. It's decent. I don't dread fighting it. I'm like, oh yeah, old monk, it's cool, I guess. But not really too much beyond that. Next we have the Adjudicator, which is neat. It's cool. I like the design. The arena you fight it in can be a little bit annoying because it's kind of cramped. Other than that, not really too much to say about it. Next we have the Old Hero, which, on its own merits, is pretty good. Solid moveset. Not really too many moves, but that's pretty standard for Demon Souls bosses. Cool design. I really like the color contrast of this bright, glowing golden aura in contrast with the very dark, bluish environment that you fight it in. I like the stealth mechanic. I actually like the stealth mechanic in this one. It's just that the guy's blind, so if you don't make a lot of noise, he won't be able to find you until you attack him or something, or you accidentally make a lot of noise. So that's pretty interesting. And the backstory behind it, I think, is pretty cool as well. My problem with the Old Hero is not with the Old Hero itself. It's with the run-up to the Old Hero, which is the entirety of the ritual path, which largely consists of very narrow, tight spaces in which you either have to very precariously run past enemies that could probably kill you very easily, or you'll fall to your death. Or you have to spend like 10 minutes fighting everything if you die to the Old Hero and have to run back to it. And that is kind of annoying. So we have this very annoying thing that's not really part of the fight itself, but sort of impacts your enjoyment of the fight. So I'm going to put the Old Hero in the enjoyable tier. Next we have the Storm King. It doesn't really have too much going on with it mechanically. It's a gimmick fight. It's the first Storm Ruler fight. You get the Storm Ruler, you get rid of a bunch of the fodder enemies, and then you spend like 5 minutes swinging at the Storm King every time it flies over the arena, and then it dies. Pretty simple. Not much going on there. However, holy shit, is it a cool fight. You're fighting this giant godlike flying manta ray thing in the middle of a hurricane or something, and you're using this sword that's able to fire shears of wind that can split the storm. Every time the Storm King flies over you, the rain stops because its body is blocking it. I think the Storm Ruler attacks blow the rain away. And the OST for this fight, it's absolutely wonderful. I love the Storm King OST. It's so good. So almost entirely for sheer spectacle, I'm going to put the Storm King up in quality. I quite like it. It's pretty good for a gimmick boss. You can tell why we've brought back the Storm Ruler fight multiple times. Next, Leechmonger. Normally, this would go in the boring category, because it's a very nothing boss. There is not really much interesting or engaging about it. It's a big mass of leeches. Its design isn't even that interesting either. But this suffers from the same problem that, for me personally, the Old Hero suffers from, and that the run-up to it is fucking awful. The first level of Valley of Defilement is probably the worst area in the game. It's terrible. It is absolutely god-awful. You have to go through it anytime that you need to fight Leechmonger. And if you are unskilled or unlucky enough to somehow be killed by Leechmonger, you gotta run through the whole fucking thing all over again. And if you haven't waited to do the 5th Archstone until the end, or if you're not running a magic build, it is gonna be fucking miserable getting back there. So for those reasons, we put Leechmonger in the annoying category, just a little bit above Dragon God. Just because the boss itself isn't terrible, but everything leading up to the boss is pretty god-awful. Next we have the Dirty Colossus, which is a giant mound of trash. Not really much interesting about it. The reason it's not put in the annoying tier is because the Swamp of Sorrow actually has a shortcut that lets you skip most of the area. You just kind of walk around the area. Thus, the run back to it is just long, but not particularly annoying. So, it's boring. It's more of an actual fight than Phalanx, so I put it up a little bit higher. Now then, the only thing good in the Valley of Defilement, both in terms of gameplay and in terms of the lore, made in Astraea. This fight is really basic. It's incredibly basic. Either you kind of smack Garl Vinland while he stands in one place and occasionally swings at you, or you go to this one spot and you shoot Maiden Astraea until she dies. It's very basic, not very much interesting in terms of the gameplay or mechanics. However, this fight is great in terms of the story, the lore, the themes of it. The music for it is wonderful. It's very good. So, in terms of those aspects, I'd say it actually goes up into top quality, almost purely due to everything but the actual gameplay. The moral conundrum of going and killing well-intentioned people who are essentially just minding their own business for the sake of stopping the old one is quite the interesting conundrum. Now that that shithole's over with, we go back to Boletaria with the Penetrator, which is a personal favorite of mine purely because I absolutely love the Penetrator's design. I think his armor is the coolest in the game. It's a little annoying that you have to do a whole bunch of world tendency bullshit in the remake in order to get it, but the boss itself is really cool. He kills that goddamn laughing official for you, which, thank you for that. His, in the remake, sort of blood aura sword is really cool, and you just fight him. There's not really a gimmick to him or anything. You just straight up fight him. He's pretty much the first big night boss that you just fight, and he's pretty solid. I would say the one thing that keeps him from going up any higher than just quality is that he's pretty basic in terms of like his moveset and everything. There's not really that much crazy going on. He has like 3 or 4 moves, and that's basically it. If he had a little more going on, I would probably put him higher up, but it is what it is. I still think he's a pretty good boss. Now then, the guy who most people consider to be the final boss of the game, Old King Allant. The lead-up and spectacle for this fight is amazing. You've fought through the entirety of Boletaria, and you make your way up to the top of the highest tower to battle the man seemingly responsible for everything bad happening in the game, in a ruined throne room overlooking the entirety of the kingdom. Then you have the soundtrack. I haven't played the original, so I don't care about it being different from the original. I think it's a really cool and enjoyable theme. Against a guy that has a pretty good moveset. His design is really cool. I really like the wispy wind wings. I like that all of his attacks have a ranged aspect. I think that's pretty interesting. And then you have the soul-draining grab attack, which is pretty terrifying and an interesting mechanic. For all of these reasons, I gotta put Old King Allant in the top quality tier, and I think he earns his spot as the best boss in Demon Souls. It's unfortunate that he is not really the last boss of the game, which is where we have true King Allant. He is a blob that very pathetically swings at you while babbling about his philosophy until you beat him to death and then finish the game. Pretty boring and underwhelming. I understand why he is the way he is from a lore and story respect, but that doesn't change the fact that he's actually a pretty boring fight. So with that is all of the bosses in Demon Souls ranked. It's actually the second time I've recorded this video, because the first time the music was way too loud, and I managed to cut it down by like 10 minutes. That's actually not too bad. So yeah, with that is all for my ranking of the Demon Souls bosses. What did you think Where would you place the bosses? Do you agree with my rankings? Do you disagree with them? Be sure to let me know about all that stuff down in the comments. I will be getting to the Dark Souls bosses in a few days. By then I'll have my headphones, so the audio quality should be a bit better. Sorry about that for those of you who've noticed it. So definitely be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that when it comes out. With that, that's all for today's video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe so you don't miss any of my future uploads. I have a playlist full of Soulsborne streams where I've been playing through all the games. I did an Elden Ring playthrough. I've got a playlist full of Elden Ring lore. I plan on starting a new Elden Ring lore playthrough somewhat soon. So definitely be sure to subscribe if you're interested in all that stuff. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys around. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.